Hello and welcome to Console Shock, retro and modern gaming chat with me, Trev, and as always, Stuart. Hello, Stuart.
Hi there, Trev. How are you doing?
Yeah, we had a bit of a chat just before we jumped on, actually, because we both just received our "you can now buy your Steam Deck" notifications. That's kind of exciting, right?
Yeah, I can't wait to get mine. As soon as I get it, I'm down to CX, put it on all the Facebook groups, let's selling it straight away.
Yeah.
Make a couple of £100. That's what I'm doing.
Just got to sneak a few £100 off the joint account and not have the missus see, and then bang.
Yeah. No, I'm actually quite excited because I haven't done any PC gaming for years, so it'd be good to sort of get back into that world.
Yeah, I'm actually I'm looking forward to actually playing some of the kind of older sort of PC games that I still play, like sort of seventh. Well, it's PC. There's not generations, but sort of seventh gen era games. You know, like Space Marine and Skyrim and things like that. The Dead Space. Things that will run. Obviously, there's no Switch versions of it. Well, there's Skyrim, but there's no Switch versions of these. So that'll be fun. And obviously, Pro Evolution Soccer, because there's no handheld version of that these days. So that'll be the PC version. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Obviously, there's been a lot of videos since people first started getting them. So I think that's increased my appetite for it. But I don't think I'm going to try and install like Windows and put emulators on it. Are you going to do any of that? You're just going to buy a bunch of Steam games?
Keep it a sort of a stock machine, as they say. I saw Linus Tech Tips the other day. He put they sort of drilled a hole in the back of it, and they stuck a M.2 cooler, so a great big sort of fan, not a fan thing, sort of a, what's it called?
Heat sink thing.
Heat sink, to the back of it with all sort of copper wires on it and everything. And apparently you get it to run a lot faster, but you just got to have this great big sort of wad of copper sticking out the back.
I know what that's like because my gaming laptop that I've mentioned a few times on here, my MSI, it's a super thin gaming laptop. I went from a big, huge one, which was too unwieldy. I thought, I'll get a thin and light one. But the trouble with the thin and light one is it can't dissipate heat at all. So it thermal throttles. So certain games I can't run at max settings because it gets too hot, and it actually thermal throttles everything down, and I can't override that because the whole thing will melt. So lesson learned, don't try and get a thin and light one. As nice as they are, you kind of need that big size to stick huge fans in there, and probably why the Steam Deck is a bit of a chonk. It works because it's got a nice big screen and everything, but they can't make it as thin as a Switch, can they? Really?
No.
With the sort of hardware that it's got. But anyway, we're not going to focus on PC gaming really at all today, because we do have a guest on, and we are once again joined by a friend of the show. It's actually the fourth time he's been on, and it's Dan Wood. How's it going, Dan?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Nice to speak to you again, Trev and Stu. I know it's, like I said, my fourth appearance on this show. I think last time we did top 3 consoles. We've done Mac gaming as well, so it's always nice to come on and geek out with you lads.
Yeah, we've tried to cover a lot of stuff. Obviously, we can't help but delve into Amiga as much as I was going to say when we get you on, because you do a lot of that stuff, especially on your own personal channel. But we just bloody love the Amiga, don't we, fellas? We just love talking about it. Well, what we're going to start off with, though, I'm going to do a quick fire round just to warm us up before we get into what we really want to talk about. I've been playing a lot of Mega Drive and Super Nintendo lately. I've barely touched any modern stuff. I'm just in that phase, I go through phases of modern stuff, old stuff, whatever I get a craving for. So I'll start with you, Dan. Mega Drive or Super Nintendo, which is better and why?
Oh, Mega Drive for me. Yes. I think, technically the Super Nintendo, is probably a superior machine, but...
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone would argue that, yeah.
Yeah, it's just the game library. I mean, as a kid, it just felt like Sonic the Hedgehog. That speed compared to Mario plodding along, and that sleek black console, and it just felt like a big boy's console, didn't it, back in the day? Yeah. So I've always had a soft spot for the Mega Drive, definitely, and even the the weird add-ons. I remember, the first time I ever saw digitized video, on a Mega CD.
Oh, incredible!
In a shop, and even though it was like a postage stamp in the middle of the screen, it blew my mind as like a 11, 12-year-old kid seeing that in Comet. Yeah, it was incredible. So Mega Drive for me any day.
Oh, cool. Good answer. And especially these days with Mega CD games on like flat panel displays, if you're hooking those up through, a retro tink, or if you've got a SCART socket in them, they don't look great. I try to play Power Rangers, the Mega CD game, which is just a pure FMV, but it's full screen. It looks it's just a jumble of blocks with occasional Power Ranger face coming through. It looks like yeah.
If you stand across the room and squint and look through a net curtain, they kind of look all right.
It's like a magic eye thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
pretty much. Stu, what about you?
Well, as Dan said, the Mega Drive. I've got to say the Super Nintendo, haven't I? So
no, I don't say Mega Drive.
Well, we can't all say Mega Drive. That's the Mega Drive is good. It had a lot more sort of adult games on it, didn't it? Like Mortal Kombat had the blood on there, and Street Fighter 2, the first one came out, the Championship Edition, and it had a lot more adult games, I felt. But I think the Super Nintendo, and I certainly liked. If you talk about sort of Sonic 2, Sonic 3, it was there seemed to be a lot more skill involved in the Mario games, and the plodding along, as Dan called it. I think that actually sort of almost sort of made the games a lot more sort of precision, sort of platforming, which I seem to like that. And
there's more depth, I think, to Mario. I think, isn't there? Yeah,
certainly. And things like Zelda, and you felt like you were engrossed in a world, sort of rather than sort of. I don't know, playing things like sort of eSWAT or Streets of Rage. They're all great games, don't get me wrong. They're both brilliant systems, but to me, the Super Nintendo just had the edge.
Fair enough. I'm going to go with, it might depend on what day of the week you ask me, because I could flip between either of them. But I think for most of the time, I probably will say the Mega Drive. Similar to Dan, really, the range of games. There's just some genres that you don't really have on other Super Nintendo, or the better examples of that genre on the Mega Drive. Beat 'em ups is a classic. You've got Streets of Rage and the best version of Final Fight. Okay, Final Fight, you need the CD add-on, but it's definitely the best version. Beat 'em ups. There's an argument about which is better in terms of Street Fighter 2, but I think the control pad kind of wins it for me. The Mega Drive, 6 face buttons, more like a Capcom arcade cabinet. And even games where there might be an inadequacy in certain areas, like other Capcom games that we didn't get, or even Konami games where there was a Mega Drive version, but it wasn't quite up to scratch. They're still pretty good, like Sunset Riders and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Hyperstone, and they're still really good games. And I like the add-ons as well, like Dan mentioned, like the Mega CD gives you another 200 odd games, and a lot of them are really good. There's a lot of janky FMV stuff, but if you get beyond that, say you got Final Fight, Night Trap is a pretty good, actually got the best FMV game. You've got some ports from the Mega Drive that just added CD soundtracks, but I think they're still worthwhile if you didn't have the originals. And just 32X, actually, people take the mick out of it, but I think, 40-ish games, 38, 39 games. I think there isn't really a complete, utter crap game. Maybe Cosmic Carnage. Apart from that, the name sounds bad, doesn't it?
Scottie Pippen Slam Dunk. What was that one? That was
Slam City. Yeah, that was a Mega CD 32X upgrade. Wasn't it? Yeah, but you got your Star Wars Arcade, Virtua Fighter, Virtua Racing, all those great 32X games.
I think you made a good point there as well. The Sega Arcade ports as well. Outrun, Golden Axe, all those. Drive, weren't they? So it's having them at home was incredible.
Yeah, there was no real equivalent to a lot of those, really, because you got like Top Gear and things like that. But it didn't get Road Rash and sports games, and pretty much all the sports games are better on the Mega Drive. FIFA, and you could say International Superstar Soccer on the Super Nintendo, but that's also on the Mega Drive. The deluxe version is anyway, which is pretty good. Well, there you go. So I guess the Mega Drive has won that round, 2-1 there. Would you say, Dan? We'll go with that.
I think we can go with Mega Drive having a win there.
Yeah.
Why not?
Well, let's go with that then. We've finished alienating all of the Nintendo fans who are unsubscribing as we speak. But hopefully we'll get a few more back with our next topic. So, when we get someone like Dan on, who's got some amazing Amiga content on his own channel, obviously what you guys talk about on the Retro Hour and what you've talked about when you've joined us on here, Stu, me and you, we talked about the Amiga a few times. A few years ago, we actually did an episode that was just about upgrading the Amiga 1200 and kind of where you'd want to get it to kind of get a nice classic Amiga experience these days. It's probably already a bit outdated now with the further advancements that have happened, but we want to talk about Amiga accelerators because they've kind of grown from where they were in the 90s, well, in the 80s, really, as soon as the Amiga came out, I think were the early examples. Now, certainly when we got to the 2010s, a whole new industry has kind of grown up or popped up with brand new accelerators. So you don't have to rely on, the old ones from the 90s that are probably failing as we speak. You can get brand new examples that you can plug into your Amiga. So I guess we should start off really. I mean, Dan, what was your early experiences of an accelerator? Did you get one for your Amiga in the 90s or did you have to wait till later?
Yeah, and I had to wait till later on because you probably remember they were really expensive.
Oh, yeah.
You look at them in magazines, often more than the machine was.
Yeah.
I think, you look in Amiga format, those adverts that are in the back, the accelerators were generally $400 to anything up to £1,000.
Yeah.
So, the only expansion I had as a kid, I managed to get an 8 megabyte RAM upgrade for my Amiga 1200 that went in the the trapdoor slot on the bottom.
Yes, yeah.
And I think it had an FPU on there, a floating point unit, which I didn't use for anything, but it was on there
good
as well.
Boost though. That's a pretty good boost.
Yes, I mean the thing is, with the Amiga 1200, the way it was designed, they only had what's called chip RAM on board,
yes.
which the custom chips used, and the CPU had to share the access time with the custom chips. So it turns out if you just put a bit of extra memory in there in the trapdoor port, you could actually speed your machine up by I think about 3 or 4 times what it was out of the box. So, even though it wasn't an accelerator, just having that extra RAM did give you a speed boost in the machine as well, and obviously let you run, more demanding programs as well. So it was worth having.
Yeah, I think that would manifest itself a lot with, say, more demanding programs, I don't know, even something silly like using the flood fill tool in Deluxe Paint. It would do it in, a fraction of the time. 3D polygon games, there was plenty of them on the Amiga, would run a bit better. And I think even loading times as well, you could load more larger chunks of a game's, code and, data into RAM. So you potentially could save on the disk swap. So I think we all needed that second disk drive, didn't we, in those days with some of the games we had to juggle.
You'd often see that on a game, wouldn't you? Extra RAM detected, starting the splash screen, and then it would load more of it into memory.
Yes.
You didn't have to access a disk drive as much. So once it had loaded, it was a bit quicker.
I think when we got to about probably 89, 90, I think one megabyte was a necessity almost, wasn't it, for a lot of games? I think,
and it felt like so much RAM, didn't it, back then?
Oh yeah,
never going to fill a megabyte. I remember thinking that when I got my A500.
I just put I've just put an average price in of £500 into inflation calculator, and so let's say back in 1994, and that card or a card would cost £861 in 2021's money.
That's why I didn't have one.
Yeah. So same here, Dan. Yeah.
It
was. I didn't know anyone with one.
It's funny because concurrently the Macintosh that was often shipping with 68020s and 68030s. Often the 68020, the first Mac was in 1987. So it kind of shows you how kind of behind in some ways Commodore were. We only really got it as a standard built into an Amiga until 1992, wasn't it, when the 1200 came out? There were accelerators, of course, that had that chip in there, but that was kind of toddling along.
But I think that's why they sold, though, because you look at a Mac, what they're like $2,000, I think.
Easily.
Yeah, the fact that Commodore, obviously they didn't put the specs in that the Mac had, but that meant that they could sell them for £300-400. That meant parents could just about afford them for the kids. So I think that definitely. I like the fact that the Amiga was upgradable if you had the cash. I think that was a good route to go down.
Yeah, I mean, well, even Apple, I think they squeezed the life out of the basic 6800.
Yeah.
I've got a Macintosh SE that I picked up recently, one of the later all-in-one classic, box Macs, and that was from 1989. So they were still using that basic Motorola chip. They would tweak a few things around it on the motherboard to get some extra performance, but yeah, that chip was used in an inch of its life, I think, in its various incarnations. I don't think it was any of the others really got anywhere near as much use in terms of used in some kind of a big, huge selling platform. I mean, was there a particular accelerator that you wanted to get back in the day that you'd see in those magazines and people were raving about?
Yeah, I remember drooling over. Do you remember there was the GVP accelerator, Great Value Products, and what it was for the Amiga 500, and it
the
slotted on the
sidecar
side.
one. Yeah.
And it kind of matched the look of the A500. Had like the same slant.
Yeah.
Had like a switch on the front. I think in there you had like a hard disk. You had extra RAM, and I think they sold them like 30 accelerators as well. I've got a feeling they were about £800, if you got them kitted out. But yeah, I used to look at those and daydream about one day I'll own one of those. They were always the ones that I drew over.
It's funny because I don't think the Amiga 500 was like really set up for sort of CPU upgrades as much as the later Amigas. It was really the trapdoor at the bottom, wasn't it, for the RAM? But that wasn't that. I don't think you could put any accelerators through that, was it? I don't think the bus lines that were there would support overriding the CPU. Am I right in that, Dan? I don't think you could do
that's
that.
only for RAM. Yeah, it was just I think you could have a half a meg in the A500, then a megabyte in the 500 plus.
Yeah,
if you wanted anything more advanced than that, like a SCSI controller or fast RAM or an accelerator, obviously you'd have to do that via the side bus.
Yeah, I think when we're in that early period of like, I mean, it wasn't massively early. It's the the Amiga was already several years old, but 1990, 91 time, where that was a period I had a lot of Amiga like magazines from that era, even though that was later on that I picked them up in a charity shop. But reading about all the stuff that was around, although it only would have been a few years past them actually being mainstream. It wouldn't have been that long ago at that point. It was kind of difficult to know where you would really need that power. I think it would have been games wouldn't really be looking for those sort of processors. Maybe the RAM was about as much as they would look for, really. But I suppose it'd be people that use like 3D rendering software and art packages and things like that. I feel like when you got to like the mid 90s, it almost, certainly when the Amiga 500 was getting a bit old, when it was hitting its sort of third and fourth year, and we had like the PC was hitting its stride with Pentiums, that I think it really started to be left behind, and Amiga format was starting to sort of do features and reviewing things almost as if it was a standard, wasn't it? That everybody had at least an 030 kind of going on at that point.
Well, he started to get the games that needed it. Like I remember stuff like Alien Breed 3D.
Oh yeah,
out these kind of, because the Amiga wasn't built to do 3D games, but obviously having extra CPU horsepower, it could just about do first-person shooters and stuff, because obviously Doom was the biggest thing in the world back then, and I remember so many of my friends, selling their Amiga 1200s to buy PC just to play Doom. So
it was a nail in the coffin, wasn't it? A big one. I know Commodore didn't do themselves any favors at all with the way they handled things, but if that was really, if you could point to a specific, event, where you were like, the Amiga's kind of on its way out now. I think Doom was really what did it. Wasn't it at that point? It had been surpassed as a gaming platform. You could probably argue that had already happened, maybe with like the Mega Drive and the Super Nintendo. But you could always say, well, mine can, do spreadsheets and do my homework on it. But, I'm not sure that always flied. That excuse did it with our parents. But Stu, did you have any accelerators or anything with your Amiga setup back in the day?
I didn't. No, I remember my 1200. I might have had something with more memory in the bottom, but I remember I had a screen, a hard drive. I had a CD-ROM drive for it, but sort of my memories is what sort of Dan hit the nail on the head was. You see in shops like Doom or on TV, it was full screen, it was fast, it was exciting, and then you got Gloom or something. And that you were playing it in a small little letterbox in the middle of the screen, and you'll try and it's just as good, and you could just see there wasn't that. It didn't perform as well, and you'd see in magazines, and what was a little bit disheartening for me was. I think there was like Quake came out, or a version of Quake very late in the day, but you had to have so much, a tower with 68060 processors and this and that to actually sort of play it. So it just felt like this is now the sort of the reason to go to an Amiga, to a PC. It's like the sort of natural sort of progression, because the accelerators are great, but if the base machine is what's the point in putting a 30090 in a 486? It's just not going to sort of cut the mustard, really. So,
and the price of those cards, you could buy a PC generally for the same price.
Exactly. And I mean, in those days, you really didn't have graphics cards for sort of PCs. Everything was
Visa local bus graphics.
Exactly. Or just had a card in there to give you the sockets. But was there the cards made by Blizzard? That's what I seem to remember.
Yeah, Blizzard Accelerator cards.
That was
were made for the Amiga.
It was an Amiga format,
Yeah, they were a bit more late 90s, weren't they? Probably around that 96, 97, 98 kind of era. And I think that was when, these kind of 3D games were coming out. A lot of those PC ports, because I remember there were companies like Clickboom were one company I remember that did a lot of PC ports. And
did
games
Napalm didn't they, I think?
Yeah, and the games that needed like, an 040 or above.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've got no sales figures on them, but I can't imagine they sold all that well. So, I mean, there was people took the Amiga even beyond the 060. I mean, they released some, Power PC accelerators. I think they were about £1,500 or something. They were very expensive.
I think you're breaking kind of the compatibility, weren't you, at that point with the classic Amiga? I think.
Well, I think the way they worked, because it was a bit bizarre. I mean, I've actually seen one. It was a company called Phase 5. I remember used to make them.
Yes.
And they actually had, because you're right. I mean, the Power PC natively couldn't run 68K applications.
Yeah.
But the way they got around that is by putting an 060 and a Power PC on the same card, and it would kind of swap between them as it needed. Yeah. Which meant neither of them kind of had, the full speed, because they're always switching all the time, and it doubled the price of the card because you had to pay for an 060 and a Power PC. But there were people that it was.
I mean, when we're talking about Doom, I mean, really, if you're absolutely desperate to play it, I mean, you could get a Super Nintendo and for 80 quid in like 1995 and play okay, it's not the best version you'd played nowadays, but it was pretty decent and serviceable in 1995, and it was quite incredible actually, and was pretty much the complete Doom experience, save for a lower frame rate. Exactly, 32X, 3DO. I think an awful version, but probably the PlayStation's the version you'd want to play in those days. But you can just get a PlayStation for 300 quid. That's not cheap, but in those days, but an Amiga 1200 was still about 300 quid. At that point, which probably has a fraction of the power of the PlayStation when you think about it. We were trying to sort of boost the hell out of them at that point in the 90s. I mean, Dan, have you tried to pick up any of those old accelerators nowadays, or have you tried to do that in the past when perhaps they were going cheaper? I know a lot of those old ones go for a lot now on eBay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. They're old cards now, and I imagine a lot of them are not that reliable anymore. Yeah, and for the price they go for, I mean, there are, in the last decade, there's been companies that have started making better cards anyway that are cheaper that you can buy new. So, in terms of the old accelerator cards, I haven't actually got any in my collection. It's just I kind of really started around probably 2010, 2011, when the new generation of cards came along. That's when I and they were affordable. So that's kind of when I got into accelerators.
It must be worthless now, really, because there's all these new options, really, that are far better and obviously more reliable because they're new. I mean, are people still buying those old ones, that potentially could fail?
The only ones I see coming up, and again, is for ridiculous money, are the Power PC ones.
Right,
the Phase 5 cards on Amiga or eBay, but again, generally talking £1,000 plus for them. And there's not much software to run it either, apart from some PC or Linux ports.
Yeah, I think Apple handled that quite well because they did the same transition from the 68K to Power PC, but it was completely transparent to the user because the Mac OS had a built-in emulator for the 68K. So if you ran a 68K bit of software on your Power PC Mac, it would just work, and it actually sometimes would be faster because it was such a big power jump. And you wouldn't have to run any additional software. It was all transparent. And they've had to do that a couple of times since, when they went from Power PC to Intel. There was the same thing where you'd have to, for ages, there wasn't a version of Photoshop that ran, that was a native Intel version on the Mac. So you had to run the Power PC version on your Intel Mac. But the speed was still pretty good. I think they said it was only slightly slower than it would have been on a native Power PC. And they've had to do it again now. Now they're doing the ARM M1 and M2, I think, chips now we're at. You're running an emulator to run the Intel code that you might be running on your Mac. And I think a lot of stuff, when I sort of go into, when I'm running, I've got a Mac Mini, the M1 Mac Mini, when I sort of look at the activity monitor, there's actually a lot of the apps that are the daily sort of use ones are already native Apple M native code. So a lot of the software companies are doing a pretty good job of that. I don't know if like Microsoft Office is yet or anything like that.
You can't tell though, can you, unless you look really, because they run really well side by side. Yeah, I'm on an M1 Mac now, and unless I look at Activity Monitor, often I don't know what's running Intel and what's native code.
It's a great way of doing it.
With the Amiga stuff, they did actually try to do that though, because I think that you can, because when the later PowerPC operating systems, you got like Morph OS and Amiga OS 4.
Yes,
they had these layers in there that could run 68K apps. But the problem is with the Amiga, you had those custom chips which you couldn't emulate, so it meant that you couldn't run games and stuff that relied on the custom chips. So that was kind of, I guess, where Apple had an easier transition, not having reliance on such a heavy reliance on custom chips.
No, it's just the CPU, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's all it needs to do. It's probably why it's difficult to emulate when you go from one, video games console generation to the next. It might be easier from this point because it's all Intel basically, but certainly in like the 7th gen and the 6th gen, these are customized, completely custom graphics accelerated designs, weren't they, with bespoke CPUs and all kinds of stuff. So and often they would completely abandon all of that for the new console. PlayStation went from its own Sony Emotion Engine chip to a PowerPC chip in the PlayStation 3. Not something that you could easily run a PS2 game on. So that's why they just thought, well, we'll just put a PS2 in the PS3. We'll have some of the chips on the motherboard as the PS2 chips on there, and that's how they managed to get it to work. And obviously they took it away completely and then had to use software emulation, which they're using these days as well on the PS5. But yeah, it was difficult for the Amiga to go through that transition. Plus, there was no real direction, was there? There was no singular company kind of telling it, we need to do this now. It was, SCOM and it was Gateway 2000, wasn't it, for a year or something, I think.
Yeah, they used to get. Yeah, I remember. And then there was VizCorp, I think, was another one that owned it for a few months. And it went through so many different companies. And I think companies like Phase 5 were a third-party company based in Germany. They just decided, look, no one's taking charge of this. We've decided we're going to go down the PowerPC route. We're going to make an operating system. So they kind of took charge of it. And then I remember when I think Gateway or Amiga Inc., whoever it was after that, they kind of had a different plan. And it just felt like because there was no direction, I guess that kind of put a lot of users off, especially, the price of the cards. You weren't going to invest 1,000, 1,500 quid on something that you weren't sure was the proper path, I guess.
Yeah, it kind of restricted it to the hobbyist kind of market at that point. Had you tuned out from Amiga at that point when it got to like 98, 99, or were you still...
No, I was still into it. Yeah, I was still. Yeah. I mean, I kept my Amiga 1200 was probably my main machine until around 2000, 2001. Actually, I mean, I ran it alongside a Windows 98 PC.
Did you put it in a tower or anything, or was it still just in the wedge? Yeah,
it was in the wedge, but it had like an IDE, CD-ROM drive hanging out the side of the case on a cable.
Yeah, that's why I had.
Yeah, the case was never screwed in because I had like my extra RAM in there, and I had a 3.5-inch hard disk, that I couldn't close the case with it in there, and it was a bit like Frankenstein's machine. But I kept it running, and I bought the magazines. I mean, I bought CU Amiga and Amiga Format until their last issues, and then I bought there's Amiga Action, Amiga. Oh, there's one that was on the market in around
Amiga Active.
Yeah, the one that came out in like 2000, didn't it? For a couple of years. I bought that until around 2001. So, I mean, I kind of, I kept an eye on it. I think it wasn't really until, so I didn't have a great experience with Windows 98. I found it quite buggy on my machine. But when Windows XP came along, obviously you had memory protection and everything, and it ran really smoothly. And that's when I kind of packed my Amiga away. That was a sad day. But yeah, I mean, I told on right till kind of the end of the Amiga's commercial life, if you like, and beyond.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right there. Windows XP was probably the first truly stable Windows, where you could work on reliably without it crashing at all for months on end, really, unless you did something absolutely crazy with it. But yeah, I guess God's juice.
I was going to say, Dan, you mentioned this is more for my sort of knowledge, really, but you sort of mentioned around 2010, lots of new sort of graphics cards came out and accelerator boards. More like accelerators really than sort of graphics cards. But so am I thinking about sort of the Vampire, or were these sort of new cards built on sort of old technology, or?
Yeah, the ones I remember, the one I initially got, because I kind of got back into Amiga probably around 2007. So I took a bit of a break for about 5 years, and then ended up, or actually threw away my Amiga 1200s.
Oh my God!
I'm not proud of.
No.
You should be proud.
I'm devastated to think of that memory. Yeah, I can't think about it.
You're going to get some 8-bit guy hates now.
Oh yes.
Should throw them away. Never throw. Don't ever damage it. Don't ever open it.
I like to think that the bin man saw them and thought, I'll give them a good home or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
He probably brought it back again.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. He got them and took them to a video game museum.
Put them on Amiibo. That's the place.
That's what I'd like to think. Yeah. So we'll just make believe that happened. But yeah, I mean, I actually picked up another because I got an Amiga 600 for free around that time. For some reason, I remember. Wow. Yeah, I lived in Leeds at the time, and my housemate, we were talking about all video games one night. We had a few to drink, just after our student days it was, and I went on eBay, and for some reason I wanted to buy an Amiga game, and I can't remember which one it was, but I remember it was a game that I really liked the box art of, and I thought that'd look cool on my shelf. So, I'd had a few beers, went on eBay, I thought, I'm just going to buy that game, put it on my shelf.
Perils of eBay, drunk eBay bidding.
Yeah, but it was only £5. And then the seller got in touch with me and he said, actually, I've got an Amiga 600. You can have it for free if you want with the game.
Oh, my God.
So I was like, oh, wow, cool. So I got an Amiga. That kind of got me back into it. Then I got an Amiga 1200 off eBay in around 2007, 2008 for about 100 quid, which obviously they're a lot more now. And that kind of got me back into Amiga. Then I decided that, I kind of wanted this stuff that we're talking about before, accelerators and all that. I thought, well, I've got a job on that now, and maybe they're a bit more affordable these days. Maybe I can finally get the machine that I wanted as a kid. And then there was all these companies that started popping up. Like the first one I got was by a company called Individual Computers.
Yes.
And they do the ACA accelerator range.
And I got one of those.
Yeah, and they're great. I mean, I got it from Amiga Kit, which are an Amiga retailer that's still going strong today. Based in Cardiff. I went on their website, ordered one there. I think it was about 130 quid.
I think I got mine there as well from those guys. Yeah. Really good service.
Yeah, and it's got like 32 megabytes of RAM on board, and it's got no 30, hasn't it? And the thing is, you look at the accelerators in the 90s, often you'd have to take the top of your Amiga 500 case off because the cards were that big they couldn't actually fit through the trapdoor port. But obviously now RAM chips are a lot smaller these days, so they can cram them all on like a couple of little chips. So yeah, I got one of those, put it in my Amiga 1200, and finally got to experience what an accelerated Amiga's like, because I think when I upgraded to an A1200, I got that probably around 93, 94, my A1200, and even games I used to play, there was some kind of 3D games I play in the Amiga 500, like Z-Wolf. Which is like a bit like Desert Strike, polygons. And I found that I played it on my Amiga 500, but it wasn't until I got an A1200 that I saw how it actually should run. It made a massive difference. And like the intro to games like Elite Frontier, you see that animated that 3D intro on there that crawls on an Amiga 500.
That's always the good test, isn't it, of the performance boost, that intro. Yeah.
Yes, generally the benchmark, isn't it, people use on YouTube videos and stuff. So, that kind of opened my mind to what an Amiga could do if it was a bit quicker. And getting an 030 in there, because, I like to play games on my Amiga, but also I like to do stuff like, play around with, Workbench and, applications and that kind of thing. Even, using web browsers and IRC clients and stuff on the Amiga. And I like messing around with that kind of stuff. And having a bit of extra speed in there, it actually made that thing, that kind of stuff a bit usable. I mean, obviously, you're not going to go on Facebook or YouTube on your Amiga 500, but with an 030 in there...
Don't tempt me.
There's a challenge. But with an 030 in there and, 32 megs of RAM, I could go on websites like Aminet or WHDLoad and download, game ROMs and that kind of thing. So it made that kind of thing doable, where if you had a stock Amiga, probably be waiting 20 minutes for a web page to render. So
easily, Google, the basic Google search page, it might struggle with there.
Yeah, so that was really, the initial, it was those ACA 1230, I think, was the first card I got by Individual Computers. And obviously since then, before we get into like the really high end stuff like Vampires and everything, but also the Terrible Fire cards as well by Stephen Leary, which came along a couple of years later. Yeah,
they're really interesting, aren't they? Like, it's almost like he's came up with the design, and initially you just kind of bought the board, really, didn't you? And you had to put your own chips on it. I think, was it something like that, Dan?
Yeah, initially, because he released it all open source and he put it all on GitHub. And yeah, you're right. You'd have to either make it yourself or find a builder. And I think he had some kind of rules about, they could only charge a certain amount. They weren't allowed to make loads of profit on it. So really, it was a gift to the Amiga community, really, from Stephen.
A lot of the shops, Amiga shops, sell them now, don't they, with everything pre-populated, and you just buy them like you would any other accelerator, I think.
Yeah, and they're really good. I mean, he kind of does a whole range of them. And he also does them because, I mean, that's the one thing I've always found about the Amiga is there are a lot of options for the Amiga 1200. But generally, for other machines, there weren't that many. And Stephen, the first one of Stephen's cards I got was for the CD32, which gives a CD32 an 030.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's like 64 megs of RAM in the CD32 one I've got, and it's got an IDE header on there as well, so you can put a compact flash card in there or an SD card. And basically, it's got a keyboard port on there as well, and an RGB video out, so it turns the CD32 pretty much into an Amiga 1200, souped up Amiga 1200.
I'd argue that it went to get beyond it, yeah. I think
we got the CD-ROM as well.
Yeah.
So it's so to me, my CD32 is my main gaming Amiga because it can run, with that card in there. I can have all my Amiga games, from a launch menu when I turn it on, or I can boot CD games as well, so you can play pretty much any Amiga game on it.
Yeah, you can't necessarily do that with just an Amiga 1200, even if you do boost it up, because the CD32 did have a couple of extra little, I think the Akiko chip inside it. Yeah. Which just isn't, it's the only Amiga that has that. So you kind of got the complete range there, haven't you, in the CD32 if you can boost that up. Yeah,
and the fact that, when you've got the accelerator card in there as well, it can do, it can kind of soft kick, like, earlier kickstarts and stuff. So you can run games that only worked on the Amiga 500 using WHDLoad work great on there now. And also with CD games, you get the CD audio mixed in with Amiga sound effects, which is hard to do. Unlike an Amiga 1200 with a CD-ROM drive, you've got to really mess around with audio mixers and all that. So in terms of a solution, I think, the Terrible Fire cards are really good. And, since then he's made, expansions for the Amiga 500. And I know at the moment there's a few out there. He's doing them for like the Amiga 3000 and the Amiga 4000 as well, which, even though they were the big end Amigas back in the day, because they probably didn't sell all that many compared to the lower end machines, they've kind of been neglected quite a bit over, in terms of new expansions over the last 10, 15 years. It's been hard to get like a new accelerator for them. So it's nice that Stephen's actually making, high end expansions for the top end machines as well. So yeah, there's a lot out there, and they're quite affordable as well. I mean, if you get, I think the current, the A1200 expansion, I think that retails for about 160 quid, I think, so, compared to what they were back in the day.
Yeah,
a lot more affordable now.
I think the CD32 one, it just sort of slots into that. You sort of unscrew that little cover at the back, don't you? It gives you a honking great big expansion sort of dock almost, doesn't it? And I think it pops in there, but it's got all like I think you can get all the the Amiga like a keyboard interface and all the various outputs the 1200 has, I think, on there as well.
Yeah, it's got like there's a PS2 port on there, so you can plug in like a PS2 keyboard.
Yeah.
And you've got the Amiga's RGB, there's 23-pin connectors, so you can plug in a standard, Amiga to SCART cable. Because the CD32 only had S-video, or composite, which wasn't great, but
really
with this expansion, which is bizarre. I think the French models had SCART output, but only the French CD32s.
Yeah, when they're bloody SCARTs.
Yeah, exactly. So, but having that lets you use a standard. You can get an Amiga RGB to SCART cable off eBay for like a tenner. So it lets you use them and get really nice quality out of the CD32.
It was odd they left that out because every other Amiga is really good RGB, obviously because they need to, because they would be intended to be plugged into RGB monitors, but to have it not in, especially when other consoles like the Mega Drive, SNES, their contemporary consoles all supported RGB. It's just it was a weird decision, probably just maybe I guess they were expecting people to plug it into fairly straightforward TVs in those days. Not everybody was using SCART in 1993. Were they at that point?
I think I was using RF back then, I think.
I think I was actually. Yeah, I think it was the late 90s that I discovered the joys of... I think it was actually the Sega Saturn, because you got a SCART cable with it by default in the UK, which a lot of people complained about. But luckily my TV had SCART, so I was like, oh wow, this is way clearer than what it normally should be. What's this about? So yeah, I was converted at that point. I got SCART cables for everything under the sun at that point.
I think using RF is the reason that I was the only one in my family that needed glasses by the time I was about 16. So.
Just adding that layer of Vaseline over the image, isn't it? Really? Yeah, no, it wasn't the good. We didn't know any better though in those days, so it couldn't be helped. So yeah, I mean, obviously you've covered like terrible fire. So I think one type of accelerator that's got a lot of publicity in the Amiga sort of realm is, and you've touched upon it briefly already, the Vampire. I mean, would you say that is the best sort of accelerator to get? I mean, I don't think they're that cheap, are they? I think you have to sort of get them built to order as well, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I first got I got the Vampire version 2, which cost me about 150 quid. So they weren't that bad then. I mean, this must have been about, God, 6-7 years ago when I got that. And that was for the Amiga 600.
That's a while ago already, isn't it, that they've been around?
Yeah. So, but I mean, now they've kind of developed from there. I mean, what it is, it's some people kind of say, you go on Amiga forums and Facebook groups and you often see all these arguments like, is it real Amiga hardware or is it an emulator? Because it's FPGA. So what it is, it's what's that stand for? Field programmable gate array. So it's really what it's doing is simulating, you could say, not emulating, a 68K processor. So which using it, you can't tell the difference, but there are some purists who want the actual original 68K chips on there. So you kind of get a bit of a fraction there who are not keen on the FPGA direction. But I think in terms of, I mean, you look at the high end, like the terrible Fire 060 cards that need the actual original Motorola 68060, and they are like trying to find hen's teeth now. Those high end chips. And I mean, I think last time I looked, to get like a Revision 7 060, people are selling those on eBay for like £200-300 for just the chip.
That's insane.
If you can find them. So I mean, FPGA does kind of feel like a sensible route to go down. So you're not relying on these really hard to find parts. And also it means that they can kind of flash new cores on there as well and add new features to it, which is cool. And with the Vampire though, they kind of took it beyond. I mean, originally it was just a little expansion that you clip over the 68K chip in the Amiga 600, the one that I've got. It kind of pushes over it. And the reason they call it a Vampire is because it kind of, it sucks the life out of the 68K and takes over the machine. And then they started adding stuff on there like its own graphics core. So you could do 24-bit video, and it's got an HDMI output on there as well. It's also got an SD card slot on there, so you can use that instead of the Amiga's IDE port. So I mean, it kind of got the stage where it was really, I mean, I remember seeing the comments on my YouTube videos like, what of the Amiga are you still using? Really, the Amiga is just a mouse and keyboard now. It's really a computer in itself, the Vampire. And they actually realized that. And since then, with the current models, the Vampire V4, not only can you get those as expansions for the old Amigas, but also they do them as standalone machines as well. So you can get them in a nice little case and actually have kind of a modern Amiga experience on completely brand new hardware too. So, they're not for everyone. I think, they're probably a bit overkill if all you want to do is play like Lemmings or something. But for people that want like a really nice, 16 million color workbench and maybe doing, web surfing or IRC or running 3D rendering programs, and you want that kind of, those experiences that we'd read about in the late 90s in Amiga format and stuff like that, those machines that always seemed a bit unattainable to us back then. If you kind of want that high end Amiga experience, really see what it's interesting to see what Amiga Workbench is capable of when you run it in 1080p and 16 million colors. It actually looks pretty modern, really. So it's still got that 1993 foundation there, but actually it runs really nicely with an extra power.
Yeah, it's an interesting, like you touched upon already, like what is it? Is it an Amiga anymore? I've always thought about what do I really want my Amiga to be, and I only ever really wanted to get it to a point where I can just play every classic Amiga game from when it was a viable, platform, when it was it was still kind of active as a platform with a few extra bells and whistles, and that's pretty much where I've got my Amiga 1200 up to. I've got an ACA, I think it's 1233N inside that, and that's an 030, 40 megahertz 030. With it, I think it's got 128 megabytes of RAM, which is an insane amount of RAM and way more than it ever needs. And really all I do in it is I've got a CF card in there, 32 gig, I think it is, and it's just got every Amiga game on WHDLoad. That's all I ever really want to do, really, is just to do that. Basically, just make it almost be able to be an EverDrive, like an Amiga EverDrive. And I've never really seen the appeal of, trying to get it up to the level of like a late 90s PC. which is kind of seems to be the. Well, obviously, you can run more modern OSs on it when you go nuts with a Vampire, and you could just have it as almost like a daily driver, perhaps, for a lot of tasks, modern tasks. But yeah, that's never really appealed to me. I mean, it's yeah, I certainly wouldn't justify. I don't know how much is a Vampire these days. I mean, they've been out for a few years, but I'm not sure if are they cheaper now? Have they gone up again?
No, they've gone up. I think for the A1200 expansion, it's about 450 quid. I think.
Wow.
So I mean, they've gone up in price. But I think you're right. I mean, the 030 I think is kind of the sweet spot.
Yeah.
If you want an ultimate kind of gaming Amiga, because the 030 is really just a kind of enhanced 020 really. So it's very compatible with, the earlier games and stuff. You can run pretty much anything on it. When you kind of get to 040 and above, you sometimes run into compatibility issues.
Yeah.
I think Trev's looking to make new episodes of Babylon 5.
Yeah.
And he's looking for some real power.
Get that video toaster going.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you often look at this, and I kind of see that argument as well. I mean, I've actually got a very rare accelerator in my A1200. Which is called it's a Warp 1260, and it's not available yet. You can't buy them, but hopefully they're going to be releasing them soon. Obviously, they've had problems like everyone has, getting parts over the last couple of years. But they sent me like a beta version of it a couple of years ago, and it's really, if you want the ultimate classic Amiga experience, it's got an 060 on board that runs, I think it's 105 megahertz.
Wow.
It's got a Wi-Fi chip. It's got an ARM coprocessor on there, where they're going to do stuff like make it like a sound card, so you can play MP3 streams. It's got 24-bit graphics on board as well, HDMI output, USB ports on it as well. So I mean, it's pretty much anything you could cram into an Amiga 1200 is kind of on this card. But again, you get the argument where, yeah, you can get your workbench looking nice. You can maybe stream an internet radio stream, but without the software, kind of what are you using it for? And often what you see is people, they do videos and they run, as we talked about before, Quake and Doom or Heretic and Hexen, which to me, they're like, those games are cool, but if I want to play Quake, I'll play it on a PC.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, there are some late 90s games that came out on the Amiga, but, you're probably only talking a handful of them that needed those kind of specs. So I think it's definitely kind of, chicken and the egg. We need, these accelerators are there, but without the software, is it worth buying them? It's a tricky one, really. I think there definitely needs to be, to sell more of these cards, there needs to be more software that takes advantage of them, I think.
Yeah, they just don't really, it doesn't really appeal to me getting to that level of extreme performance. I just wouldn't use it. Like I said, it would be cool. Yeah, maybe I would load up Quake, and be like, oh, cool, look, it's Quake. But then I'll probably play the first level and, get bored. And then I'll probably end up if I played it again, it will probably be on, the PC, just be the PC version or even the Sega Saturn version. And I could just sit on the sofa and hold a controller and sort of do it. Stu, have you ever wanted to? I know we do an ongoing joke where you still haven't bought an Amiga. But if you got one, what would you do? Would you just keep it completely stock and just pop a bit of RAM in? Would you want to get an accelerator? What do you think you'd do?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Really, is buying one of these cards, which costs hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Not too keen on that, but I'd certainly like to get a 1200 with a 68030 and a bit of more RAM, so I can do WHDLoad and play all the games that I used to remember. And that's really what I'll be sort of looking to sort of get out of it. And I think that's really what most people want to sort of do. And you see sort of people, they get up all these machines, they'll fill it up with all these cards, they'll connect it all, and then they can, we can use Twitter. And it's like, well, I can use Twitter on my three-year-old iPhone, and you kind of like, well, actually, I don't want it for that. On my iPhone, I can't play classic Amiga games, with the keyboard and the mouse and the correct controller. I can't do that. That's what I want the Amiga for, rather than to try and do sort of modern things, which I can do 10 times better on my phone, my laptop, my PC, my work computer, my all different methods, really.
I've got to say, though, because I am, the guy who's got several different Amiga setups, depending on what mood I'm in. Like I said, that CD32, it's a great gaming machine, but I've also got an Amiga 4000 with an 060 and all that in there as well. And, I've got a graphics card in there, and I run, a 60 million color workbench and stuff on it too. Again, in terms of software and stuff, not a hell of a lot that takes advantage of that, but I think in many ways, it's kind of fulfilling what I always dreamed of having as a kid. And there is something, I mean, I've tweeted from my Amiga 4000 before. Not the best experience.
I think I remember that from one of your videos, Dan. I think it was.
It took an hour, but it was good fun.
Well, I think part of it is just because, you can. The fact you've got, I mean, God, you might be paying thousands of pounds for all these expansions over time.
You kind of have to, right? I guess when you've gone that hardcore,
Yeah, but there is something kind of a bit bittersweet about seeing a 30-year-old computer, finally, sending something out in the modern world on the internet or streaming internet radio and that kind of thing.
You get a kick out of it, for sure.
It's definitely a niche hobby, much more than playing Amiga games. But the fact that people are making these cards, I guess, there must be some of us out there who, get a bit of a twisted sense of satisfaction off that.
I mean, they're niche, but they must sell in there probably tens of thousands, these accelerators, to make it worthwhile, right? I mean, no one's really making accelerators for I was looking into classic Mac accelerators, and there's no one really making modern versions. Like the Mac SE that I've talked about earlier, that had accelerators in the early 90s that you'd be able to put an 030 in there. So I mean, obviously, people don't really use those for games, but for the software that you run on them, like Photoshop and word processing and productivity stuff, they would be so much quicker. But no one, despite the following that Apple has, there isn't really any kind of a community that, aside from like floppy emulators and and things that will replace the hard drive, there isn't really anybody making accelerators for them at all.
Which maybe because Apple kept making machines and the Amiga kind of just stopped in 94.
Yeah. You just get the latest one. So
well, I remember there were some PowerPC cards for the 68K Max. We called the Sonic cards.
Yeah,
and
that's
recently
right.
I've been following a thread on Amiba, a website, and people have actually managed to kind of get those working in the Amiga because they're cheap. You can get a Sonic card for a Mac, a PowerPC accelerator for I think some of them sell for like 50 quid on eBay, compared to the £1,500 that Amiga ones go for.
They have like G3 and G4 in them and everything.
Yeah. So some people have actually managed to kind of get them working in the Amiga or working on that now. And there's kind of some other stuff we should kind of probably touch on as well. I mean, kind of more recent developments that kind of go a bit beyond kind of classic Amiga accelerators. For example, you've got the Pi Storm, which is I don't know if you guys have seen this.
Yeah, I think that's a better approach, isn't it? Like cheaper hardware that you can kind of repurpose, like the Raspberry Pis and their spin-offs, into accelerators. I think that's kind of a good approach, I think.
I think Retro Shack did a video yesterday, and he said, would I get the Amiga 500 Mini? And he was sent one from the manufacturer, and he was like, well, it's all okay, but I wouldn't get one because I've got the original machines, and he's got the Pi 400, and that's got everything on there, so it acts like
that's the one that's in a keyboard, isn't it? The one that's
I think Dan, you did a really good video about that, and how you can get everything into that. It behaves like an Amiga, and it's a fraction of the price, 10 times more reliable, and once it's all set up, it seems like the perfect solution, really.
Yeah, I mean, the Pi 400 kind of reminds me of an Amiga 600 or something in a small all-in-one machine, just in the keyboard. And Amiga emulation on there is, really complete. It can run a lot of stuff really smoothly, and you get a great experience on there. But what other people have been doing, I mean, with the Pi Storm that I mentioned, this is actually where you get a smaller Raspberry Pi, just a board. Like, for example, people have been using the Raspberry Pi Zeros, and the 3A is the one I've got.
Yeah.
And you put it on a little piggyback board, and you slot it into the CPU slot on an Amiga 500. And what it'll do is it will emulate the 68K using the small Raspberry Pi. So what you can do is, I mean, you can get much higher speeds. You can emulate like an 030 or an 040 using a Raspberry Pi that you can pick up for 25 quid.
Well, yeah, it's an absolute fraction of the price, isn't it? And these custom built accelerators, there's no contest really.
Yeah, I think in terms of compatibility, that there's still some stuff that doesn't run reliably on it. It's still very much kind of beta. It probably doesn't replace something like the ACA cards just yet.
Yeah,
but I imagine with more development, it's going to. But then there are also other efforts as well. I mean, I got sent a little card before Christmas. I don't know if you've heard of the Buffy accelerator for the Amiga.
No.
Well, it's not in a working state yet.
Sarah Michelle Gellar made that herself.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Is it the Vampire Hunter?
The Vampire Slayer, yeah. That's
Vampire Slayer, yeah.
Oh, good. I'll see what
that's
they
clever.
did.
And this thing is, this is a classic Amiga accelerator. It's aiming to be the fastest accelerator ever. Running, it's an FPGA-based device, but they're going to emulate a 68030, but running at 3.2 gigahertz. With 1 gigabyte of DDR3 RAM. So again, that kind of gets back to what we were talking about before. It's like, what's going to run on that? But I mean, we joked before that you're not going to be watching YouTube on your Amiga. With that, you're probably good.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see kind of where that goes. So it's kind of just very alpha state at the moment, but I'm hoping to get a video made on that when it's up and running. So
look forward to that.
It's amazing how all these people, because if someone's making that, and they go to all of the effort, what's the sort of the payoff for them? Because obviously, they're helping the community, they're building something that's something enjoyable to them. But is there? I can't imagine there'd be much of a financial. In fact, it'd be more of a financial burden on them. And it's amazing that people put this effort in for the Amiga and to produce all these amazing products that are sort of homebrew. It's just phenomenal.
Well, you could look at guys like Stephen Leary, he does it all in his spare time, and I think he obviously makes a loss of doing it, not only for his time but also he sends out. He sent me a few cards in the past and stuff as well, and he gives them away at user groups and stuff. I've seen him do that. So it's no one's making any vast amounts of profit off those higher end cards. But again, I think it's just talented people who kind of want to maybe stuff like that. Buffy just kind of see how far you can actually push like an Amiga 500. It's sometimes quite interesting to see if you can kind of get it up to modern spec, which. It kind of proves what a good foundation the Amiga had if you can do that kind of stuff on it, though, I guess.
Yeah, it's scary. I'm actually kind of terrified at where it's going to go. Soon we'll be running crazy things like, Crisis. We'll be running on an Amiga 500, with some kind of Raspberry Pi inside that puts it up to like 4 gigahertz and 8 gigabytes of RAM and it's just going to be terrifying where things go.
It says YouTube commented Inspire it, isn't it? Can it run Crisis? I get that in all my videos. It'd be nice to say yes, it can one day.
Give it a few more years, yeah. Well, before we completely wrap up, I think the final question I'd like to ask you, Dan, what would you recommend then as a good sort of accelerator and a good kind of Amiga setup to have that kind of would give you, I guess, an all-round Amiga experience? What would you say?
I think the majority of people probably just want to play the classic games, and you've touched on the A500 Mini, which is obviously beyond the scope of accelerators. But I think I've got an A500 Mini, great little machine. If all you want to do is play the old school games, you get a really good experience there. You can stick a USB stick in, get all your WHDLoad files off the internet, and you can have what we were talking about before. Machine that you turn on, you've got just a launcher menu. And I think for most people, if that's kind of what you want to do, that's probably the best bet, I think, because it's new, it's affordable hardware. You're not relying on, 30-year-old machines. But if you want that original experience, I think the setup that you've got there just sounds perfect. Get the 030 in there, bit of extra RAM, because, if you're launching stuff, WHDLoad allows you to play games that were originally floppy disk only, because a lot of Amiga games were floppy only, weren't they?
Yeah.
But WHDLoad allows you to run them from the hard disk, but because it loads it into memory, you need a bit of extra RAM compared to what the Amiga comes with stock. So having an 030 there, maybe 64 or 128 megs of RAM, that's going to be enough to load in even the most demanding classic Amiga games. And you put a compact flash card in there or an SD card, you can have that launch menu. I've got a thing called Tiny Launcher on my machine. You turn it on.
That's a great bit of software, yeah.
I have it on boot. Yeah, literally I turn it on, it goes straight into that. Move over with the joystick, press start on a game, and that's it. So it's really, like you said before, it's that EverDrive experience, isn't it? What you get on like a Mega Drive or a SNES with an EverDrive. So I think really for what most people kind of want from an Amiga these days, if you want that nostalgic machine that's got all your favorite games on there, the touch of a button. Because using a stock Amiga, actually, if you ever go back to using an A500 with one floppy disk drive. It's a bit of a painful experience today, I think.
It will,
We've been a bit spoiled, I think, with all this stuff. So
if you think you're going to break out a bit of Monkey Island 2, then you pull out 13 floppy disks, and you're like, bloody hell.
Yeah, so I think that would be, an 030 bit of extra RAM, a compact flash card, and for most people, you'd be good to go with that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just a caveat with that, obviously an Amiga 1200 is quite expensive on its own. Perhaps we're sort of saying maybe for someone that's got it in their loft and they think, I'm going to get it out again and play some games on it. Then the expense obviously is just to get the accelerator. So you're probably looking about, what's a half decent 1200 now? That's probably a couple $100 at least.
Yeah,
more like 300. So you might still drop about 400 rips on an Amiga 1200 with an accelerator, but that's kind of a middle ground between going crazy and hobbyist with the vampire and everything, and the absolute bottom of it, which is the A500 Mini. I mean, has that this is a side sort of question really? Has that replaced any of your Amiga setup at all, the A500 Mini, or have you put it back in its box?
Yeah, well, a few people asked me, they were like, oh, what did you need it for? You've got Amigas and stuff, like, it's a pointless machine to have for you. And I must admit, I don't use it all the time, but I do have it set up in my living room, plugged into my, I've got a 65-inch telly in there. It's next to my PlayStation 5, just sitting next to it.
Yeah.
And, it's good to have, that living room Amiga experience because, my modern TV hasn't got a SCART connector or anything like that. They're all HDMI now. So in terms of having something that I can play in the living room, it's great for that. But also, I went back to see my brother recently. And, we used to play Amiga games as kids. And sometimes he's like, bring your CD32 up or, have a few Amiga games. This time I just brought the A500 Mini up, hooked it up to his telly. We're playing like Lemmings at 2 o'clock in the morning and stuff with it. So in terms of having a little Amiga you can just kind of throw in your bag and take it anywhere, if you've got mates that, want to play games with you. Yeah, I think for that kind of experience. And if you're going to shows and that kind of thing, we're off to Norway in a couple of weeks' time. We're doing a few retro panels over there. Cool. Generally, I always bring kind of a console, for the hotel room or whatever. Normally my Switch, but this time I'll probably the A500 Mini and set it up in there just for a bit of gaming, after the show and stuff. So I think in terms of an Amiga you can take on the road around your mates' houses, that's kind of where the A500 Mini's kind of slotted into my life.
It's found a little niche there.
Yeah.
You're going to try and you're hoping for a maxi. I mean, that's kind of what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of see, but then it wouldn't really replace any of my machines. I've got an Amiga 500, I've got an A1200, a 600.
Yeah.
So it's like, I probably wouldn't use a maxi as much as I'd use a Mini.
It's interesting what design they might choose because you can't really a 500 to be ginormous. It'd be interesting if they just maybe try and have a 1200 sort of design, or even the 600. Or they'll do a 3/4 of the 500 maybe, which would be a bit annoying, rather they went another route. But yeah.
Well, we had them on our podcast, and the guy, he did say, he said, they're not going to do a full-size Amiga 500 because, again, like you said, it's too much plastic. It costs a fortune. Yeah. But I've got a feel, I think what they might do is, like you said then, I think they might do like an A500 styled machine that's about the size of the A600. Yes. That would kind of be probably the most logical, I'd imagine. Because some people have said, why don't they do an A600? But then I think the A600, obviously it wasn't as popular as the A500, and a lot of Amiga fans actually don't like the A600.
Yeah, so it's not really a pop culture kind of icon, really, is it? I mean, the 1200 is probably the only other one you could do, I think, isn't it, really?
Yeah. Yes, I mean, they might go down that route, but then it's probably not as iconic as the Amiga 500.
No,
No,
it's
it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, well, we'll keep our fingers crossed for that and see what they come out with. We've gone over the hour, so we'll move straight on to our lovely little mentioning of where we are on the interwebs. I've entered a new form of internet there. Stu, where can you find us?
Consoleshock.net, the website. We're all over Facebook, Console Shock, Twitter, Console Shock, and you can find us on all podcast clients. Search Console Shock, and YouTube as well.
Cool.
Search Console Shock.
Catch us on all the different podcasts. Well, catch us. We should be there. Dan, how about yourself? You've got obviously your own channel and the Retro Hour. Where can we grab those?
Yeah, if you search for just Dan Wood on YouTube, you'll find my channel. I've been doing, some Amiga stuff. There's actually another Amiga video hopefully coming out in the next few days. I'm going to be doing transplanting an Amiga 500 into these new crystal Amiga cases, which you kind of see through and everything. So that's going to be a nice one.
Oh, wow.
I did one last week about an iBook G3, kind of unboxing and using one of them.
Yeah, I saw that one. That was a great little video. Yeah.
Yes, and I've done that. I did one recently about getting browsing the web using a Sega Dreamcast. It's actually quite a surprisingly popular one. So yeah, I kind of cover all.
1999.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it was an experience. But yeah, so I mean, I kind of cover all kinds of stuff from my YouTube channel. Search for Dan Wood, and if you want to get the podcast, yeah, any podcast app, just search for the Retro Hour, or we have a website, theretrohour.com.
Cool. We'll check Dan out. He's got all of the various channels on there. Lots of great content coming up. So thank you, everybody, for checking out the latest episode of Console Shock. And remember, only Amiga makes it possible.
Amen.
See you later, everyone.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys.